We will be checking out some of the conference championship specials available on the DraftKings Sportsbook on Sunday. First, though, Sean Payton, he is out in New Orleans as we approach 10 head coaching vacancies in the NFL. It's a wild offseason, obviously. Bukes, we'll start with you. What'd you think of Payton's decision to step down?
Well, I mean, convenient timing. You know, you're like $71 million deep in salary cap issues, and you're like, I'm going to step back. Maybe he realized Taysom Hill's not a good quarterback, too. So all of this just comes to fruition, and he's like, you know what, maybe it's a good time to step back. I mean, look, the Saints team is in for a major overhaul with all the issues that they're having with cap space. They have questions under center. And look, you know, Sean Payton's been an extremely good coach. There's nothing to take away from that. You know, maybe he's not someone, you know, quote unquote, retiring, stepping away. But this whole team is in need of an overhaul, and this seems to be the first domino to fall.
Pierce, any surprise?
Yeah, no, it's time to get out. I think Michael Thomas wants to get out too. I wouldn't be surprised to see Alvin Kamara get out as well. It's not quite a dumpster fire, but there are a lot of issues on this team, which is in contrast to when he took over. Jim Haslett built a really strong team. Hurricane Katrina happened, and then he inherited a really good team, made it better. But this team is in trouble moving forward.
Matt, what do they do next?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but to Steve's point about Sean Payton wanting to get away from this salary cap problem, I mean, I did the same thing in my Dynasty Fantasy Baseball League. You know, my team, I went all in to try to make the finals, and then I had to rebuild. It was like, I don't feel like that. So, you know, I'll just leave the league, right? You can do that. Pierce mentioned Michael Thomas. I think this is the thing that's the most depressing about the Saints is the injuries. They could have had a team where we had Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas, who I think when he's healthy is in contention for best receiver in football, and Jameis Winston. That just would have been so much fun, and we never really got to see it. So I'm more just sad than anything that didn't really happen for at least, like, you know, a lot of games. We had a game or two of it, but not much of it.
All right, let's get into the weekend then. Of course, there are still 4 teams that are set to play, and they all have head coaches, so we'll celebrate them. The Bengals, the Chiefs in the AFC, couple of stud quarterbacks. Of course, Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow. You can get plus 150 odds on the pair to combine for at least 600 passing yards. Pierce, is it going to happen?
Yeah, it's going to happen. Burrow get the 600 on his own. They're giving money away this year. Last week, we had a bet where we had to consider Josh Allen and Mahomes getting 10 touchdowns last week for plus 2,000, which we all agreed should have been closer to plus 5,000. That was one of the most action-packed games of the year. Went into overtime, and they still only managed 7 touchdowns. And you compare that to this week, this should be 700 yards for plus 150.
You in line with that, Matt? Is the number too low?
I don't know. Like, I don't think these guys do it, but you are getting plus 150. So I'm a little torn here, but I just feel like this game can go more ways than people realize, right? Like, it seems like everyone's assuming it's a foregone conclusion that the game is close for one, and also that both teams decide to pass a lot. The Bengals spent most of the season as a run-first team, and there were a couple of fluky games in there where they were either losing and needed to pass, or they were playing the Ravens with no secondary, and that particular week they decided to just game plan where they were going to pass every play. But I don't know that I think Burrow's good. Obviously, the receivers on that team are really, really good. But I think there's a pretty likely scenario where the game is just a little more conservative than people are expecting, and we don't see a ton of passing. So I don't think it gets there. I think we probably end up between 550 and 600.
Steve, I feel like Matt's just being a contrarian on this one.
Yeah, maybe he is, and that's good for content. He knows how to do it right. So congrats to Matt on that, and shout out to him for leaving his league. You know, I've no qualms about that at all. Here's the thing that I have about Joe Burrow, specifically in this game. Who was the best quarterback in the league, yards per pass attempt against man coverage? Joe Burrow, averaging 9.2 yards per pass attempt in that scenario. Who runs a ton of man coverage? The Kansas City Chiefs, who annihilated that secondary for 446 yards back in week 17 against man coverage. Joe Burrow. So if we get anything even close to that, then on the other side of the ball, you got Patrick Mahomes. Here's a nice bankroll builder. Take the over. Take that bet.
All right, let's stay in the same game. Go to the pass catchers. Of course, Matt, we'll go right back to you here. Travis Kelce or, of course, Jamar Chase. Will either of them reach 125 receiving yards? This bet gives you 2 options plus 200 odds if one of them can get there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to be a bit contrarian again, but I'll at least name a player that I like because I don't just think no one's going to score points across this entire conference championship weekend. But I just don't think the Bengals and Chiefs are going to be as high scoring as people expect. If I'm down on the quarterbacks a little bit, I can't really be that high on the pass catchers either. So Tyreek Hill is really the main reason that I don't love this. I think that he continues to be the main part of the offense ahead of Kelce. And 125 yards is just a lot for Jamar Chase. And I think he's a little bit reliant on breaking tackles, which he does do from time to time. But I think T. Higgins might even be the more reliable receiver on the team. So the one guy I like this week to hit his over for yards is George Kittle. He's in the other game. I don't really love either of these guys to get to 125.
Bukes, 125 too lofty for those two?
It's kind of odd because it's like, why are you throwing Travis Kelce in the mix? He's done this once this season. Like, yes, he's had a couple of games where he's gone over 100 yards, so it's not like it's out of his realm to do so, but this is not something that he, consistently hits. Like, he does get the yardage, like I mentioned, but over 125 is a bit odd. So now it really just brings you down to Jamar Chase. And we've all seen that Jamar Chase is obviously somebody who can do this on a basis that, is more consistent, at least, than Travis Kelce. But this is still really a lofty number. Like, getting over 100 is impressive enough. Getting over that 125, it is something too. So I'm not crazy about this one. Can Chase do it? Of course. But like adding Kelce in the mix, I don't really think you're giving giving too much more with that sense. So I'm not liking this bet at all.
Pearce, throwing it back to the last question. If Joe Burrow's going for 600-700 yards by himself, you must be a believer in Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I'm bullish on Cincinnati. I'm bullish on Kansas City. I think both of them can easily clear this number. I think it's half of what Chase got in the last time he faced this man-to-man defense, as Steve mentions. 125 is a big number, but it's not necessarily a big number for Chase. We've seen him explode. If you look at Kelce, 24th in DVOA is what Cincinnati is versus tight ends. They've allowed the 5th most receptions, 6th most receiving yards to tight ends. He was quiet in the first matchup, but that was his first game back from COVID and other injuries. I would imagine that he's going to be healthy, ready to go. And if you want to play the narrative street, he's from Ohio and he played at Cincinnati. I don't know if that's going to give you any edge, but when you're chasing a huge number like this, you'll take any kind of narrative you can take.
Guys, the NFC title game is going to feature the Niners and the Rams. I don't entirely know what to make of this game, but what I can tell you is one special focus is on Cooper Kupp, who of course has had an historic season. The odds plus 400. The Kupp goes for 100 receiving yards and LA scores 33 points. What do you think of that number, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, the Rams have gone over 33 points 5 times this season. So it's not something that they're not accustomed to doing. So I've lost more money than any other team on the 49ers this year. So I'm the worst person to ask about how I think a 49ers game is going to go. With that said, do we think that they're going to put up 33 points against this team? I mean, I don't want to say they've struggled against San Francisco this season, but, they lost that first one 31-10, and then they lost early and they're 27-24. So it's not like they've exactly crushed this team. The Cooper Kupp card is fine. Of course, like he's going to go over 100 receiving yards when they actually need to pass, which you saw against Tampa Bay, 9 catches for 183 yards. So when they're passing the ball, unlike when they were in Arizona, he's going to go over that mark. So I do sort of like this one, but the struggles that they've had against San Francisco can't be forgotten about either.
Pearce, you're going to have to be as bullish on the Rams as you are on the Bengals for this to come to fruition, are you?
I am not. It's not that far off. LA has averaged 28 points per game, so it's not that far to get to 33. But San Francisco has a pretty good defense, and San Francisco's offense could struggle giving short fields to LA, which could help with the point totals as well. Kupp really isn't much of a question in this game. It's just, can LA be consistent for 4 quarters? We've seen them play 2 really good first halves where they scored over 20 points in both of their playoff games. They've eased off or just have been inconsistent in the second half of those games. And then, like Steve mentioned, San Francisco has played LA well in the past. Last time San Francisco played LA, they had a 40% pressure rate. If there's a 40% pressure rate on Matt Stafford, they're not getting to 33.
Matt, I know you like George Kittle, obviously, on the other side of this game. How are you feeling about Kupp and Rams offense exploding?
I'm just trying to run these numbers through my brain because we need at least a 20% chance to make plus 400, a good bet. And there's probably 60% chance that Cooper Kupp gets to 100 yards. The Rams team total is 25 points, so we need them 8 or 9 above expectation. I mean, it's pretty unlikely. And I guess if Kupp does have a big game, then it's much more likely the Rams do really well. The problem is that 100 yards for Cooper Kupp is not necessarily a big game. He does that all the time. So ultimately, I think this probably is one that I'm going to stay away from too. I promise we're going to get to another one later in this segment that I actually do like, but I still feel like it's not quite enough odds for this.
Okay, maybe that'll be this one. We've got a running prop, plus 170 for Elijah Mitchell and Cam Akers to combine for 150 yards on the ground. Doesn't feel like a giant number here, Pierce. What do you think?
It does feel like a giant number when you look at the defenses they're facing. I like both the running backs in DFS if you're trying to be slightly contrarian and getting away from that AFC game. But betting-wise, I'm just not crazy about it. I think you can count on Eli Mitchell for 75 rushing yards. His prop is set at 71.5. If you don't think he can get there, then you should probably just go ahead and bet the Rams. I don't think he's who you really need to worry about. It's Cam Akers, who his rushing prop's at 60 yards. San Francisco is second when it comes to adjusted rushing yards to running backs at 3.5. So even if Akers gets 20 carries, it's going to be tough for him to get there against a pretty good rush defense. And I know it's amazing that he is back, but he hasn't necessarily looked amazing on the field. In his first two playoff games, 3.2 yards per carry, 2 yards per carry. I think he's the weak link that doesn't get us there.
So, Matt, Pierce basically just did the math for us. 130 on the DraftKings Sportsbook. That's the combination projected for those two. Can we get to 150?
Yeah, so it's not going to be this question for me either. I think the next one is the one where I'm going to be more bullish on it. The problem with the rushing prop, where you need one guy from each team also, is that if one running back does well, it's less likely that the other running back does well. That's not the case for a quarterback prop, where one quarterback throwing for a lot of yards means more possessions for the other quarterback. It's actually a good thing. But the better that the Rams run the ball, the less opportunities the 49ers are going to have to run the ball and vice versa. So I'm not really that excited about this one. I am a little worried about Cam Akers and the fumbling problems. If there's a running back I do like this week, it's Joe Mixon, not just because he's contrarian. I think he's got a rushing prop in the 50s. And I do think the Bengals may just decide to run the ball more than people expect. So if I have to like a running back this week, it's Joe Mixon, not these guys.
Bukes, you in favor of these guys?
Yeah, not really much to add here. Like the worry here was with Cam Akers. Like he ran the ball 24 times last week against Tampa, brought 48 yards back on those 24 carries. That's not very good. And granted, Tampa's been a much better run defense than almost every team in the league. But, you know, even against the Cardinals, 17 carries for 55 yards, not exactly oozing, a ton of yardage in those scenarios. So I don't like this one here. I think Elijah Mitchell should have a good game. We've seen him run over the Rams in 2 games now, so I feel confident about him. But Cam Akers is the weak link in this one, so I'm not a fan of this one.
Last one, 4-game special. This is exciting for Conference Championship Sunday. The odds are plus 500 for every starting quarterback to throw for at least 250 yards on Sunday. Matt, is this your question?
Yeah, I think we can get there on this one. Plus 500, just so it's going to take a little bit of luck for this to happen, but at plus 500, I think there's enough probability for all quarterbacks to get to 250, that one's worth it. And really what it comes down to, for me at least, is I think Jimmy Garoppolo is at least better than these guys think he is. I don't know if he's good, but I do think that the 49ers should have some success passing. I think their passing game is a little bit undervalued, even though it's not great. I think part of what's happening is they just look so bad last week against the Packers, and this environment just sets up better, if for no other reason than the weather is going to be a lot easier to play through. Los Angeles is a lot less problematic than Green Bay in terms of, the cold and the wind and everything. So I think Garoppolo should do fine. And for that reason, I mean, the other 3 quarterbacks, we probably all expect them to go over 250 yards. So I think they have at least a decent chance to all get there.
I was just going to say, if anyone feels like they're going to be the ugly duckling in this situation, is the most handsome man, Steve, which is, of course, Jimmy Garoppolo. How are you reading this thing?
I mean, what a dumb follow-up statement that was. No one cares about how handsome he is or anything like that.
I care.
About this
He's
question.
a very handsome man, Bukes.
I know. He's a former Patriot, so we got to gush over him. Look, the problem is I would like this bet more.
He's still handsome.
Will you shut up? I would like this bet more if it also counted the yards that the opposing defense would gain when they pick 6 Jimmy Garoppolo 7 times in this game. Then Jimmy could be able to hit over 250. But since that doesn't count, I don't like this one because all 3 of the other quarterbacks will hit this mark, and Jimmy Garoppolo is going to walk away with 172 yards. Mark the tape, and then let me know when that actually comes to fruition, and then we can say how smart I am, and everybody can be embarrassed about how much you were gushing over former Patriot Jimmy Garoppolo.
I didn't say anything about it being a Patriot. Pierce, you're more pleasant. What do you think?
It's going to be hard to – yeah, I try to be. This is basically a Jimmy G bet, and I don't want anything to do with it. His props at 225, so you need him to go 25 over that. He's gone over 250 8 of 17 times this season. A lot of those games he was healthy. I just don't see him getting there. The last 2 games, he's been way under this. He's been closer to the number that Steve mentioned, 172. Now, some of that's due to game scripts. The other part is due to health. The game script probably will be better, but his health, I don't think it's going to be any better. You look at the last 2 games, his intended air yards, 6.2, 5.7. Even if we do get a positive game script where he's passing a lot, he's just checking the ball down. He's not throwing deep passes. You're basically going to need a big-time Deebo Samuel play to bail you out. If you don't get that 70-yard Deebo Samuel play, you're not cashing.